so bad. You can get up done Snelling, but
Yeah.
Get it started.
Yeah, the buses.
I have my own thoughts about that. Okay, call the meeting to order. Roll call shows we've got all of our counselors. Hooray. Now it's time for open forum. Anybody have anything they'd like to address the council for? I know at least one.
Hi, my name is Maria Erickson. I'm the president of the Cook County Historical Society. And we would like to request a letter of support from the city council for, we are asking the state for approximately $2 million in appropriations this year to help us with our historical sites, to keep them up to par. Also with building a new archival storage facility, so that we can keep the artifacts safe. So, that is my request.
Do you have particular things that you could get to Mike? I mean, those things that you've mentioned, but is there like maybe so we could add some specificity to a letter of support should we decide to do that?
Yeah, I think I included in an email
yeah.
specific
Yeah.
what each site is requiring and
Okay,
what we would like to do.
okay,
We
great.
did.
All right.
I feel pretty comfortable writing that letter. If the council thinks that's all right, then we can just say okay, and then I can work with Maria and just make sure that the letter reflects what they're looking for, and then get it to them in a timely manner so that they can have it for the appropriations. Does everybody think that's all right?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yes.
Cool.
Good.
We'll do that.
Thank you so very
Cool.
much.
So we'll be in touch.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Maria.
Thank you.
Anybody else for open forum?
Okay.
Hearing none. Close the open forum. Move to consent agenda. So consent agenda today. Lots of things. 7 items. Starting with the agenda itself, I'm going to modify the agenda before we get started here to reflect some of the items that we're not prepared to talk about or that have been withdrawn from the agenda. So first item, Tennis Association funding request. The funding has been met, so they have removed themselves from consideration for this request, but will likely be returning for ancillary expenses that they might incur along the way.
That's what I heard the other, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's so that one we're going to scratch off, and then in G for the soil and water report, the 4th Street Rain Garden. There's some logistical questions that have to be ironed out about contractors and some of the language in the agreements there. So that one we're going to put that one off so that we can make sure we've got all of that, all the language ironed out. So that's the agenda as amended agenda. The meeting minutes from the previous meeting and the payment of bills. This memo that we have from the library regarding the repairs that are going to be done, that is included in the payment of bills. And it's insurance money. It's all taken care of as far as expense is concerned. Library hire, park paving project, also money that comes out of reserve, or planned for money that we have. Curling club on sale beer license, and then Up Yonder LLC liquor license for the property that was once the Wonder Bar. So those are the items for consent agenda. We can pull any of those for discussion if you'd like. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
I'll make. No. Are you going to do that, or are you going to pull something?
No, I was just gonna ask, like, this was always insurance, right? I mean, it never really needed to?
Well, it's still money that's going out.
Right.
We have to write a check, so you have to approve it.
Right, I just want, like, it should have been all, right? Should have
Mhm.
always been insurance, okay. that
Yes,
was it.
it's insurance.
Okay. Sorry.
No, that's cool. It's good to ask the questions. So, Anton, you were saying?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
All right, so that's the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Carries. All right, with the amended agenda, the next thing we have on the agenda is liability insurance renewal. We've got Ben Peters here to talk through. This is something that we do annually. So give us a little bit of a breakdown what we're talking about here.
Sure.
And then we can make our decision on this.
Perfect. So yeah, I will need, at the end, and I'll try to keep it brief, at the end I'll need 2 decisions made this go around. So Ben Peters, Security State Insurance, we've been managing the insurance policy for the city for a number of years. This year, there was an overall, the League of Minnesota Cities had an overall rate reduction by about 1.5% for property and casualty. But the city's policy went up, right? It went up about 5% for the renewal. One of the reasons, well, there's a couple of reasons, but we look at changes year over year. There's really like two categories that specifically are volatile price-wise, and that's the property coverage itself, the physical dwellings, and the mobile property, et cetera, and then the liability. And liability is broken into 2 as well for the city, both in municipal liability and then liquor liability. Property coverage overall, the rate did go down about 6%. But the city, because we have an inflation guard for properties for replacement cost, you're purchasing about $2 million more coverage for all the property. So that brings you up to about $33.5 million in total property coverage. The other thing that they changed this year at the league is they removed first-party cyber. It used to be included or baked into the property coverage, but they've taken that out. So, and it's an important coverage, so we put it back in. But those are the only real changes. So overall, property coverage went up about 1.95%, somewhere in that range, under 2%. Liability, again, that's broken out into 2 specific categories: the municipal liability and then the liquor. Both went up this year. The liquor liability just went up because sales were up. So sales were better, the liability goes up. It was up like 8%, but it's $300. It's not a huge cost. And then the liability, though, however, the municipal liability, that it went up. We added 4 households this year and the sewer connections, so you have added exposure. But also we had 2 pretty small claims, but still claims in 2020 relative to sewer backup. And they have negatively affected your mod rating for the city. So you were experiencing a 10% credit against the rating. That's been erased. So you're just paying pretty much straight rate for liability. So the impact of that is about $1,400. So let's see. We added fireworks this year. We did it last year as well. We added 2 sets of fireworks. The premium associated is $500 for that. The cyber liability, which is an option, we could discuss it. That's about $1,900 that we added. Again, that's first party, so that's your equipment, your stuff, your infrastructure. If you're cyber attacked or ransomed, I think maybe we had a ransom issue at
Some years
point.
ago.
Yeah. So those can be costly to get out of. So, but
What's
it is an optional coverage. Yep.
What's the level of insurance we get for there?
$250,000 in coverage.
Okay.
Yep. So either way, it can be stricken. I would encourage you to keep it.
Yeah, we don't have a backup plan for that. That if you want to talk about it, we'll talk about it next year.
Yeah.
We need it.
Good, that's solved. So it brings the total renewal this year to about $78,900. That's up from $75,000 last year. And that's all covered under a $10,000 deductible. When I met earlier this summer, Mike had requested that we look at a $20,000 deductible just to see what the premium impact might be for the city. And it does lower it by about $13,000 by carrying another 10,000 co-insurance. So that's something I would like an answer on. We have a binder on this thing, and we're gonna renew this tomorrow morning. But looking at the 5-year look back on claims, you haven't really had any property claims. I mean, you're already carrying $10,000 deductible, and so I might not see all the damages and things that are happening because they're not reported as claims, right? You're just paying them as you go. But I certainly haven't seen any property claims that have been 10,000 in between 10 and 20 in the last 5 years.
Even if there are, we're gonna make it up in 1 year's premium saving. You know, we're going from a 10,000 to a 20,000 and saving 13,000.
You know, when I was writing this up, this is before, I haven't seen any settlement numbers on the library, and so I don't know how that would have played out. Had you, with the 2 claims and the 20,000 deductible, what would that impact look like? But I think over year, I don't know.
I mean, it's a risk, right? That's the whole deal with insurance. What he's talking about at the library is the adjuster might try to say that that's not 1 claim, but 2 claims. And so it wouldn't be a $10,000 deductible, but 2 $10,000 deductibles. And so now it would be 2 $20,000 deductibles. You know, we're maxed out at 40 though for the year. So it's 10 and 20 right now. It would be 20 and 40. So even if we ended up paying the whole 40 next year, you know, we only have to experience these savings a couple of years to make that up. I think it's pretty rare that we've had claims, and we can afford to self-insure the extra 10 and extra 20. We have that in our balance right now, actually, to self-insure that deductible. So I think it's something worth thinking about.
So what, just a quick high-level 2-sentence, what would make that claim be separated in half? Or,
72 hours.
Yeah.
Oh,
Time frame.
timing.
I
Okay.
mean, I have a hard time with the reasoning
It's
behind
really,
it.
I do too, and we're appealing it, but what they're saying is it enhanced the drying time, which is costing more money from Servpro, and so they were waiting for an itemization or breakdown on that from Servpro. Is that where you're right? And then we did some trenching and some other things in preparation, but
Yeah.
Because the event itself goes on beyond 24, no, 72 hours.
they're
It goes
considering
on-
it 2 separate events.
You're saying because there was 72 hours between the
Yeah.
events?
Oh, between the events,
Between the
not that it
events.
went that,
Yeah,
okay,
and I
got
just
it.
don't think that's correct.
I don't think
there
it's
was water
reasonable to
coming
think
in the
that you
building
can
the whole
prevent-
time.
Yeah, and I don't think it's reasonable to say that you could fix it in 72 hours.
Not a chance. No,
So-
it's taken us months.
Yeah, so we're appealing it, and I'll let you know. how it
But
goes.
that's the risk. We might end up with multiple claims, and we'll end up having to pay up to 40,000 instead of up to 20,000. I think we can cover that, and again, that's just, are we willing to accept that risk for the known savings?
No.
Which might even be more important next year when we've got that library claim on our experience.
Well, that's
Oh,
what I was
I see what you're
wondering
saying.
about, really, it's more how will this affect next year, right?
Yeah.
And the next 2 after that.
Although there's no mod factor associated with property coverage, right? So it's not a liability issue. It's not somebody else's property, it's yours. So there probably wouldn't be any surcharging or anything like that. But the higher deductible, I mean, when you look at the claims and why you've lost that 10% credit, you know, the insurance company is gonna look at a town of this size and population, et cetera, and risk, and they're going to expect a certain amount of losses, right? And I think their expected losses were like, I don't know, $13,000 or 12, I actually have that, let me see. Oh, maybe I don't. But something about their expected losses were somewhere in like the $13,000 range. Well, those two total claims were like 15,000, right? So it was above their threshold, and so that just, it kicks credit. It just takes away the credit that you'd earned. So you're not being surcharged. I mean, you're paying the liability, but it feels like you are.
Well, it's just frustrating because it should be, I wouldn't say it should technically be thought of as an average, but $2,000 isn't off much. It
Oh.
isn't like we just put through
I know.
$75,000 claim or whatever.
Yeah.
So it seems extreme too, but whatever,
Not yet.
I get all that.
But I think the danger, so if at the $20,000 deductible, and I haven't really thought this through entirely, but you're no longer at risk of meeting that demand, you know, so like they're not going to, I think you're gonna grow that credit very quickly because those claims are gonna be well under that $20,000 range.
Provided they are.
Provided
Whenever
they
that
are.
event happens.
Yeah, I mean,
Which
nothing
is
is
risk,
guaranteed, and,
but-
you know,
Yeah,
this is your decision.
and we still, like Ben said, we have a lot of loss that we don't claim because it's small enough that it's not worth it. You know, it's not a lot in total in any given year, but it's enough circumstance. And with the $20,000, would we look at a $5,000 or $6,000 loss and say it's not worth it? I don't know, maybe.
So there's two things to think about here. Per event, we're talking about a $20,000 deductible per event, and then cumulative
max.
for the year would be
Yeah.
the 40
Mm.
versus 10 and 20.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about. So I guess the real question for the council is whether or not we think that we can expect to have more than $40,000 worth of claims that we're going to put in the next year, or sadly between the number of 20,000 and 40,000, where it would be the maximum expenditure, that it would be worth saving the $13,000 to take on the additional risk.
Well, when Mike gets out his crystal ball, we'll know the answer, but until then, it's risk.
Yeah.
It is.
So
and-
what's
and
the
and
palatability?
Actuaries, I think they've got a pretty good system dialed in as
Mhm.
far as knowing how the math plays out,
Mhm.
right? So they're not in business to lose money,
For sure.
and,
Although they're not in business to make money here either, which is
Right.
nice. Like if we make money, it's refunded to the members. So, I mean, we get a refund every year from LMCIT.
Yep.
So we're good with a good group here to,
Sure.
Yeah.
So what's the palatability of the council for that risk versus the expense? I guess that's the summary of the question.
I think if we can save $13,000, that's substantial.
Yeah.
yeah, that sounds like real money.
Kind of where I'm at, yeah.
Because the difference is, like Mike said about that,
Yeah.
Especially that we find ourselves in the financial situation we do, that we have the ability to cover the difference, and then assuming that we don't have those claims for a couple of years, then we're money ahead. And it also, like you're saying, like if we don't cover those thresholds, then that improves our rating. So,
right.
sorry, what were you going to say?
well, I was, like, I'm just kind of curious, how much do you hear from them adjusting for weather events now? Which I think our county or our area is
getting-
less affected, but around the rest of the country, it's huge.
It is, you know, there's a lot of talk, you know, when you look at this enhanced flood coverage that we had on this policy last year, that's not even an option for us. So, we snuck it through last year, and city wasn't billed for it, you know, but we're supposed to live in a floodplain to even get that coverage, and we don't. So, yeah, I think it's comprehensive insurance. I mean, I think they're interested in making you whole, and they're not, I don't think they're trying to work around things, but they do have some pretty, you gotta check some boxes, you know, and that 72-hour thing is one of those boxes they have to check, but,
Okay.
yeah, I'm sorry, I
You feel
mean,
good about that?
Yeah, I was mostly just curious. I mean, even just like the rain thing, and that's what was at Princeton and area the other week. They had one of those stalled out storms that left them.
Oh, they
all-
got like 6 inches of rain. didn't they?
Yes, and, you know, those kinds of things we're seeing happen. He's one example. But I just wonder how much they're factoring that in.
Yeah.
So far, like I said, I think we've been pretty exempt from a lot of those kinds of issues.
And we've had them in the past too, right? And we've had serious rain events and damage resulting.
The old
We're still
100-year
here.
things and
Yeah.
100 years and
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Your-
sure.
Your floods all the time.
Well, we just
We
had
are
historical.
fortunate that governments often get other government assistance to pay those losses before insurance.
For sure.
You know, FEMA comes to town instead. They certainly did here 15 years ago when we had 6 inches of rain in a couple hours, so. But they're overtaxed too, so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So it sounds like the appetite is for the higher deductible.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. What's the other thing?
Tort liability waiver. So, the city, like all municipalities, have the option and the statutory privilege of having claims limited to $500,000 relative to tort liability. Every year, the council has to choose to either accept that, or it's opposite, let me.
Here.
No,
I always get this mixed up.
Yeah, I know, I
Every
do too.
year,
Yeah,
every year I
it's
get it
not-
mixed up.
It's not worded right. So, yeah,
Yes.
if the
did
member
it.
does not waive, so you want to accept the statutory limit. If the member does not waive the statutory limits, the individual claimant could recover no more than the $500,000. If the members waive the statutory tort limits and do not purchase excess liability coverage, of which I have that quoted as well, the claimant could recover up to $2 million. That's the short version of it. So,
There was a brief period of time where we waived
yeah.
the
The last
liability
several
limit,
years.
but not for a while, we haven't.
Okay.
So last year, and then it was at
What would
least
be the
5 years back
reasoning?
before that.
What was the reasoning behind that?
Originally, the thought was,
Yeah.
it's likely our own citizens who are going to be claiming, and we want them to be able to claim what they need to. I don't know that I can follow that reasoning necessarily, or that I agree with any of the premises behind it, but it was well-meaning.
Okay, but as long as it was well-meaning. Moving on.
So the
Right.
limitation, yeah, the limitation of the tort liability would be that 500,000 per event or per claim, I guess.
Claim,
And so
yeah.
that's what we've done in the last probably, I don't know, 3 years, something
Yeah.
like that.
4, yeah.
4?
Yep.
So then we basically need 2 motions. We need one to accept the 200,000 or
The higher
20,000.
deductible, yeah.
$20,000 deductible plan, and then another one to to agree to not waive the tort liability. So that's where we're at.
I'd make a motion to approve the higher $20,000 deductible.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. All right, so let's talk about some liability. Does anybody have a motion to not waive the?
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
The
it's-
I would
statutory
move
tort
to-
limits.
Yep, so we're not waiving the statutory tort limits.
So I would make that motion.
There's a
to
motion. Is there a
not
second?
waive.
Second.
Motion and a second.
Yes.
Any further discussion? Glad that is clear as mud.
Mhm.
So good. Yeah.
Yes.
Any other discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right, wonderful. Thank you for explaining it.
Yeah,
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
thank you.
About your pen?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so we have nothing then about either rain garden?
No, just one of them. We're gonna talk
Oh,
about
we are
Fourth,
talking
we're gonna
about
talk about
Avenue.
Fourth Avenue.
Okay.
Yeah, because Fourth Street was the only one that was considered a limitation. Fourth Avenue is a little bit of a more complex one anyway.
Oh, I don't even know how I missed that one. I read about the other one, but I didn't see the swale.
The Swale.
No, but you've heard about it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You have.
Yep, we talked about this a couple of years ago, so.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Let's see, Fourth Avenue.
Yes, the swale. So it's the Fourth Avenue, you know, the section of Fourth Avenue we're talking about, right above First Street. There's not a road there. There is a section of it that has occasionally been travelable by some vehicles, but it hasn't been for a while.
Oh, like down from the courthouse, is that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that chunk, we've been working with Soil and Water for a few years.
I can tell when that photo was taken.
Can you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got the rocks out on the street?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
One of my favorites.
Right.
So, that, I mean, at least since then, there's been significant erosion issues plaguing that. Soil and Water has been working with us for a couple of years to put plans together for a project. The original plan was to follow a natural drainage that heads to the east from the top of the hill, rather than come down the roadway through the neighbor's property and then get to the alley. And the nice thing about that plan was the water's going that way now, and there is a drainage infrastructure in the street at the alley to pick it up. The not nice part is it's literally crossing somebody's private property, and we're gonna be building a enhancement to make sure that the water keeps doing that. We would have had to go across easements and maintenance deals and lots of other things, and so instead we simplified and thought, let's just do the improvement in Fourth Avenue right away. That their engineer drew up plans for that. This contract then is the contract between us and Soil and Water to, you know, cover each other's job here. We're going to pay for it. We'll end up hiring the contractor as well. They've designed it. They're helping us out with it.
What's that? So what's it look like? Like how do they?
Is this the one that has the walking path that's on the side of it? 'Cause I know I had seen a design for that space. Yeah, that there was places for the water to kind of pool and clear as it went down, then go into the streets drainage, and then there's like a walking path on one side, but I'm not sure if that's the one we're talking about.
I thought it was attached to the contract, but it clearly isn't.
Exhibit B is very, very plain. The plans for construction are very lackluster.
Yeah. He did send them to me, so just give me a moment.
You're gonna share your screen? Is that what's
I
going
don't
on?
know that that's an option, but let's do it. Just wait for wizardry.
This is why we keep, that's why we have Patrick around.
One of them.
Do you want me to plug
One of
in
them
this
anyway.
one?
I sent you a link. I think you should be able to do it from there.
Oh, you want me to join the meeting?
What?
What's this swale?
What is this for? That's what we're gonna find out.
Yeah.
It's
It's
actually a
it's
depression.
like a place for the water.
The water goes down and
Literally
it's kind of like a ditch, but it'll have plantings in
A
it.
jump for the water.
Jump for water. That's great.
Dude, you know, if you say that, my kid's gonna go down there, whatever.
Skateboards, dirt bikes.
Yep, he's gonna
Perfect.
find some kind of a surfboard and go surf it. Surfing the swale.
Okay, I'm muted. Everybody's muted.
It's a swell whale. It's a swale.
How far up the street is that going? Quite a ways in.
Off.
Just to the top, like up by Jan's driveway, right there.
To the last driveway?
Yeah, to the
So it'll
left.
be,
Because
Okay.
Rod's on one, or Rod?
Present now.
Rod is on one side and Jan's on the other side.
Yeah.
It's not gonna impinge on either of their
yeah,
driveways.
right.
Okay.
All right, here we go.
I'll zoom in a touch more. So this, on the left of the screen is north, is the end of Fourth Avenue coming down from Second Street, where it heads off onto two private drives. We'll actually place some boulders there to make it clear that it's no longer travelable, although really hasn't been for a long time. And the swale then is just shaped ground to keep the water where we want it. heading down in the green and hashed area. There isn't a good spot to walk yet. They're calling walking path area leaving as is, but it's not actually an improved
Okay.
walking path area. It'll just be an uneroded bit of gravel. So it's definitely passable, and it'll be more passable than trying to walk right down the middle of it today where it's full of ruts from drainage. Now, the nice part is at the bottom of this, there is a sidewalk that for many years was buried under gravel, and there's even curb in the street, which for many years was buried under sediment. It's slightly unfinished in my mind that this water is just going to be slowed as it comes down here. The purpose of this really is to keep this from eroding more, not to turn it into a stream, right? There's not going to be water flowing down it all the time. First Street, which is at the bottom of this, is our next significant reconstruction project, and we might probably be doing some planning on it next year and potentially constructing in '24. We don't know about that yet, and schedule-wise, but when we do reconstruct it, then we'll make sure that whatever we're going to do with the water here ends up getting resolved into storm water, or there's storm sewer if you just go one block to the east to 3rd Avenue and 1st Street.
Right before the corner.
Yeah.
So the green really has no significance relative to plant life. It's just the chosen color to...
Seed and blanket with category 20. I'm not sure what category 20 is. You can see it's just being smoothed out, and then there's boulders at the end. Let's see if this is the shape of the swale.
How far does that say across?
12.5 feet. This is some typical sections. That's pretty much it. So it's quite a bit simplified as it was really the top left of the screen here heading into the neighbor's yard. You can kind of follow the topo lines next to their driveway. That's where some of this drainage still continues to go. That's just where the natural drainage way is, but we're not going to be making any improvements or changes that are going to divert water to that. So all this project is designed to do is keep this section from eroding. I'm going to stop sharing now.
And so in the contract, that says that Soil and Water is assuming 75% of the cost, and the city is assuming 25%.
We have one of the nice things about our partnership with Soil and Water is they're very active and successful in finding grant money to help pay for projects, including this one, and including the 8th Avenue stormwater pond that we talked about at your last meeting.
Great.
I'll make a motion to approve the operation with Cook County Soil and Water on the 4th Avenue Swale Improvement Project.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
The trick for all of these is we're committing to it being there for 10 years or we have to pay back the funding source. So, or provide some suitable alternative to the whatever we build. So I don't think that's an issue here, but just want to make sure that you know that.
And if it works, then
Yeah.
perfect
Yeah.
for leaving it for 10 years.
And maybe the bottom half would be affected by street improvement, right?
Right, I mean, that's the idea.
I doubt we'll even touch this with the street improvement, but we may try to continue this if there is water coming down there still.
Right, I guess that's what I was thinking, is like, clearly it is coming down right there, and we'll make the improvement, and hopefully the water will go.
Great place for a drain.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other-
Hopefully the water will go.
There's a
Very
little
good.
creek- Isn't there a little creek or something to the, just east of that sidewalk?
Yeah, it
Is there anything in it,
runs
or?
through the neighbor's private property.
Yeah,
And sort of coalesces in the alley.
but I know the
So-
sidewalk was constructed, is there like a little grate there or something like that, or does it go under the sidewalk?
I think it goes onto the sidewalk and it can get into the storm sewer.
That goes into the storm sewer? At that point?
I think so.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't think it goes over the sidewalk. but-
On Third.
No. And on Third, there are catch basins in the intersection.
Yeah, because there's a big one there, I know.
Yeah. And it heads down.
I think it's right by that. It's like halfway down that block. Different situation. Yeah.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, that one carries. So we can get that one started, and then we'll hear about the next one probably at the next meeting, once we have a chance to get all the language worked out. Sound right? Okay, so moving on. So RFP for the liquor store, City Hall liquor store project. The RFP has been written up. I don't know, Mike, if you want to tell us if there's anything that's different. I guess this is the first time that we've asked for an RFP for this specifically.
We didn't do an RFP before the concept design. We just worked with LHB.
That's what it was.
So this is, yeah, the first RFP we've done on the design side of things. Skipping the first 2 pages and getting to number 3, scope of work, is probably the most important part. We're asking them to review and modify the existing concept plan. So we want to use that as a basis, a starting point for the conversation, but we're expecting it to need to be either confirmed or modified before design work goes. We're also, as you can see, assuming we're going to be continuing to work with McGough as construction manager on the project, which I hope we are. Then after the concept plan is revisited and confirmed or modified to where we're happy with it, then we're asking them to do a final design, full architectural plans that's buildable, biddable, the works. We also want them to propose to us how they intend to do check-in during the full design and how they intend to do quality control of their design. And then the last piece is construction services. This one's a little bit open-ended yet, I think, because we don't know for sure what we're going to ask the architect to do. But if we think about what we asked the architect to do, the last construction manager at Risk Project, the Public Works Garage, they were on site a number of times. They're going to review shop drawings for if people are submitting shop drawings for structural steel or other structural elements. They're going to look at some of the installations to make sure that it actually is installed. The mechanicals are installed the way that they're designed with the pieces that they're specifying. So they're not here every day, but they do show up a number of times on the project to do that. And then they review requests for payment and approve them. They're part of the approval chain for requests for payment to the contractor. So we, at the beginning of this, we let people know we were going to work with McGough, and we talked about the contracts that we're intending to use to make the deal. But I think there's going to be some flexibility in terms of what's the total cost going to be. So I wouldn't expect these proposals to come back and say, this is how much money we're going to charge you to do these services. It's rather going to be broken down by each element, or an hourly or a percentage-wise, or however they want to do it. And I think that is somewhat negotiable. And the timing of it, if we release it now, we'll give them a couple weeks to respond to us, and we'll still look at them yet this fall.
So there's the RFP. Does anyone have any questions or any areas of concern about the RFP
Any clarification?
or clarification?
I have a question. Is the response time of September 16th adequate to get
It's 3 weeks.
stuff back? I mean, you know?
2.5 weeks. It's tight.
Yeah.
We could give more. The next meeting you have is 2 weeks after that, so we could potentially push that into the following week. Like, that's a Friday, we could go to the Wednesday of the following week and still have them available to go into your council packet.
Let's do that, I think.
I think more time is needed. But I have a bigger question. I'm afraid I might have been asleep at the last time we talked about this, but
It was a long meeting.
it was.
Yeah.
Is my understanding that we had not decided where City Hall was going to be at this point, only the liquor store was what we had decided that evening. And we asked about the potential of how much of this space would we really need, including some parking that does not keep everybody out on the street or using street parking to do this. Did I miss some of that?
I don't think I was at the meeting, to tell you the truth. I think I was not there.
Well, I think that those questions are appropriate for the first piece of their scope of work.
Okay, so it's still a.
But if you want to add those as specific questions that we want them to address, that they know they're going to have to address, we could do that too.
The other day I also realized, City Hall is a thing we know we need, and it needs to be here for a long time. A liquor store, things could change. I don't want them tied together. So it's another thought I would think about, besides the fact of the whole property issue and where we keep things. And the community's concern that we keep more of it in the space we are. And we agreed that moving the liquor store up the top of the hill was not what the business owners thought was in their best interest. I think I walked away saying that was the final weighing factor to this. But short of that, we might have utilized our own space. So that's.
This is our own space too, though.
Great. But bigger than that is the concept that we probably shouldn't have both spaces.
Right.
Yep.
So, but if you think that so we either need to clarify that I wasn't sleeping through that, or maybe at this point that's not what we need. This is higher level, and then we go into the details later. That's fine.
Well, that's the way I wrote it, but we
Okay.
can change that.
No, I'm fine then. That's fine.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool, so that'll be part of that's obviously part of the discussion.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, any thoughts on the RFP? Any additional thoughts on the RFP? Questions, clarifications, strong feelings?
We'll make it September 21st.
Yeah, that I think
Gives
makes
us
a
an
lot more
extra
sense.
week, basically. That
Okay.
sounds better.
So I've got a list of folks that we'll just send it directly to. I've also got, we'll put a small ad in the local newspaper, and we may place something in a professional journal as well. But I think, I asked McGough to give us a short list of names, and we know, of course, we'll send it to LHB and invite them to propose, and I'm sure we'll get good responses.
So basically 3 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little bit more.
But still tight, but.
Well, people, I don't want to lay on, an expectation to say that we'll probably get pretty decent responses. But in the past, when we've put out for these projects, people seem pretty eager to work with us. So seems to be a pretty good thing. Hopefully, we can cross our fingers and hope that happens again.
Well, if we don't, I guess then it goes out with more time.
Yeah, that's right. Then that is
Right.
probably the answer. We look deeper then. Okay, so we're good with that, council?
Yeah.
All right, great.
Sure. One more time.
So then, as per the agenda, we have
We
the
need a motion
agenda.
on that.
Do we need a motion for this, or just?
I
Or you
don't think
just
we
good?
do,
No?
because
Okay.
it's just, it's in,
Okay.
we're not actually
It's just
accepting
an
anything.
administrative.
Yeah.
Just checking.
Just check.
In the past, I think we've kind of gone both ways for RFPs. Sometimes we do and sometimes we don't.
Okay. Yeah, it's just a request.
This one, as long as we get it out, we're doing our job.
Spending any money.
Right. So, per the agenda here, we have council and staff reports as not the last thing on the agenda. So we're going to go through into our council staff reports so that we can have the end of the agenda for that last discussion. So we're going to jump in. Craig, you got anything?
Yeah, Parks and Trails Commission we had a meeting on, last week, I guess it was. Just talked about the dog park being pretty much functional and operational right now.
That's pretty awesome. Great.
We approved bylaws for our commission. What else we talked about? A little bit about the Bolly Creek trails. Part of that system is not going to be maintained by the state or feds. The feds the state land, right? Fed land? State land? Is that
I think it's
state's game or feds?
Probably
Valley
both.
I think it's both, but part of the system, part of the trails they're not gonna maintain. The other part that they are this next winter, just to see how that works out with grooming the trails. That was one thing we talked about. Did have a question though that I have to bring back some information. What involvement does the city have in gaming? There was a request, I believe, by the Snowmobile Club to start pull tabs. And they do have some locations within the city of Grand Marais and some locations in the county. And the question is, what information do they need from us? They need a permit from us?
They need a permit from the state, which
Yeah.
requires your sign off.
The city sign off?
Yeah.
They get the permit first from the state?
Well, it's a state application. It comes
Yeah.
through us first. It's like the
Okay.
liquor licenses.
Okay. Okay, well, I think they're working on that, and they're working on the liability insurance, and so there'll be sponsorship, so it's also the video gaming and pull tabs, I think, in 3 or 4 locations within the city, 2 within the county, I believe. So I'll let them know that then.
We have folks that do that now in the city. We've had those licenses here.
Yeah,
It'd be nice to have a local nonprofit be the
Receive.
end of that rather
well,
than
that's
who knows.
that's
who.
kind of what this would be shifting into, is that they would be the nonprofit sponsoring it, other than what's happening now.
Yeah.
I don't know how many locations in the city there are now, maybe 1 or 2.
Maybe just one, yeah.
There's 1, yeah, okay.
So
Alright,
they'd be like the umbrella?
Yeah, they would be the,
Sponsor? I think
yeah,
is what
they
it's called.
basically sponsor, and then they have to go to training, and they have to go through the whole operation of that, which is quite extensive, and it's very controlled, and it's very managed, so, I mean, there's quite a bit to take on there if that's something, what they want to do, so. But they're looking at the proceeds of that, so. That's about all I have, I think.
Okay.
Yep.
Anton?
I don't have anything.
Tracy?
Oh, sorry, I was waiting for Anton to keep going. I don't have much. I missed the Main Street Revitalization Program, and our county is part of that. And they had a meeting, I want to say it was August 8th. We were there on a Monday. Information is out there. It's available through the EDA. I think a lot of business owners were aware, but this came up really fast, and their timelines are fast. We've gotten them to push this back a little bit, but I would encourage anyone who's interested to get in front of probably Beth at the EDA. Beth Drost would probably be their best contact.
Okay.
This time is short.
Okay. So that's downtown rehabilitation.
It's the whole county. It's anyone along Highway 61, up the Gunflint Trail. I think I'm missing one. So it's not just the city.
Cool, awesome.
And it really is really designed to be improvements. In theory, maybe some property that had land issues or a building that was not in good shape or whatever. Here's your opportunity to improve that, but it's got a fairly broad scope to it and bigger than that. And it also takes into account the priorities that the people in the county think are important. And so for us, housing became one of the top priorities when we went through at that meeting, and some other information they gathered.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great. Anything else? All right, so I've been having some really, really interesting conversations with a bunch of folks across the state about last Friday and Saturday, as far as the broadband failure and cell failure. And it's been an interesting experience for me because it both falls within my scope as the mayor, but also through my job at the county to do communications. So I've been trying to put a lot of pressure on the different agencies that own those lines, NESC, CenturyLink. True North is doing everything that they can. I've been really impressed with their response to it, and with the attention that this has gotten, and kind of the egg on the face that all these companies have because of the way it all went down. I have no doubt that there will be a solution put forward, and that this the failover will be put in place, because part of the sticky wicket for this whole experience was that there was a redundant line, that it just there are two lines, but the problem is that it didn't fail over. So that should have, when one line was cut, all of the traffic should have gone to the other line, but that didn't happen. And the reason we got internet and a couple of cell carriers back in 6 hours was because it took them that long to figure out what was going on, and also, we can just switch this in the box to run on the other fiber. And so then everything came back up, boom, except for AT&T, because AT&T runs on a spur up to the old Ski Hill Road.
Mm.
So there's layers and layers and layers of organizational policy and agreements that wrap into all of this. And as mayor and as a communications person for the county, I'm really digging into it so that we can make sure we get those agreements worked out so that we don't have this happen again. Because it was kind of a nightmare for a lot of businesses.
Yeah, was there any consideration about doing something like Starlink or anything like that?
Not for the community.
Okay.
There was a conversation about bringing up a mobile cell unit for AT&T, but that wouldn't have done us any good really, because we wouldn't have been able to get a feed from anywhere unless we plugged it into the fiber that was already existing. So there are ways to do it, and the best way to do it is to have these organizations take the responsibility and fix it amongst themselves, and then test it regularly so that we don't have stuff like this happen. And I was really pleased to see that there's a guy from the state that talked about the crew that cut the fiber down by Silver Bay didn't do a go for one call, which is technically against the law. Like, they're supposed to call. And if they would have called go for one, none of this would have happened. So maybe it's a good thing. Now we've got our redundancies figured out, or we're going to get our redundancies figured out. But boy, it's a rough way to do it.
So I wasn't clear so a crew is working on something like private?
We're not exactly sure who it was that was digging, but they were working on an underground wire, and they hacked the broadband line straight through. And so like 11:20 on Friday, everything just stopped. And then it took about 6 hours to get internet and T-Mobile and Verizon back. And it wasn't until the next day at noon or 2 or something like that AT&T came back reliably. Meanwhile, down in Silver Bay, everything worked just fine
Because they were below.
because they were below the cut.
CenturyLink worked also.
That's right, because CenturyLink is, the reason they worked was because they're the 911 backbone. So the 911 was up the entire time. 911 never went down, which was awesome. That's the way it's supposed to work. But
And how is that?
nothing else failed over.
Oh, so they failed over.
Yep, they
Okay.
failed over because that was the agreement. And whether or not the agreement's for everyone else to use the other fiber, we don't know about that, but we're trying to figure it all out.
You'd think that'd be a given, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's different companies managing different
They were
fiber.
different
So we
companies.
have to, exactly, I shake my head at this every time I think about it. And being in the meetings with these folks that are coming up next in the coming weeks is gonna be really interesting, because if they start bickering back and forth about like, well, it's not ours, I'm gonna be, shut up. You can't talk like this, like we have to work together to get this to work, because it didn't work, and that was really bad. And I was talking with Chairman Deschamps from up in Portage, and he has his people trying to figure out how much money they lost, because they said it was a dramatic loss for them for those 2 days. So that's just things that we need to be aware of. Oh, and other exciting news, talking about Portage. The Passion Pit land transfer is going to be done. They're going to have a little ceremony down there on the beach. It's going to be super cool. I invite you all to come if you want to come. We got to post it. So I think it's going to be on the 15th. I think it's something 14th to 15th.
I haven't heard anything yet.
I read about that, I don't remember reading
I'll
the date.
if I find, I'll get confirmation. I'll send it out.
Patrick can send it.
Yep. And then we'll be able to do that too. So that's really exciting to see that come to fruition and come to a conclusion like that. So
Yeah, that's
really
awesome.
exciting. I think that's all I have.
Yeah. So we had a library meeting, just a few things from that. The Fisherman's Picnic book sale, the odds and ends thing that they did, brought in $1,700, so that was great. We're pretty pleased about that.
How was that location?
Yeah, they felt like it could have gotten better, like signage and just kind of directing people there, because it seemed like people some people knew and went, but a lot of people, it was more a wander in kind of a thing and not quite what they had hoped.
Is that because of the library, or, I'm trying to think, what did they?
It's the Friends that,
Library friends.
Right.
yeah,
but-
oh,
Oh,
They
because
usually
of the
did that.
library's condition, you couldn't be there, or? I
Well,
mean,
they used to do
They
it
used
up
to
at
do it at
the,
the community center.
Yeah.
Community,
Center.
that's right.
yeah.
Just tables and tables
That's,
and tables.
yeah,
of
and the
books.
curling part,
And
so
I
you
think-
couldn't do that?
They, I mean, this is all Library Friends. I don't know
Got
why
it.
exactly,
Okay.
but.
Different levels of capability.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have quite the space or the inventory or that they've had in the past, so.
Because I think that's one of those things people like to walk to. Okay.
And then get a
giant
box
box.
full of books and then carry it home.
Right.
That's usually the way I would
Your
do
Bring
it.
most of them back sometime during the year.
Here's my $20 egg box full of books from the book sale. Anyway,
It's always fun.
Good point.
Summer reading program went off great. I mean, they had really good participation this year, so that was great. And Amanda was happy to have something being put back in. They have the interior drain system is installed now, and they're very excited about that, putting stuff back in rather than tearing things out. So they're very happy about that. So yeah, that's it from the library. Done.
cool. That's it.
That's it.
Anything?
County Vacation Rental Committee's been meeting.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking about what they might want to put in the ordinance. I don't think it's quite decided yet. It's been interesting conversations. The software that they have access to do compliance, host compliance software is good. It already tells us anything we would want to know, so I've talked to Tim about how we might participate in that. We don't participate in their license program, but we do keep an eye out for compliance in the city, and their software that they're using automatically does that. So it doesn't exclude the city from finding locations. So I've already kind of gotten a sneak peek at that. Keep you posted as those conversations continue. Planning Commission is going to have a public hearing for a conditional use permit for someone to do a small resort on the old zipline property in September. So, not many folks are within the 300 feet requirement to get mailed notice of that public hearing. I think 2 people are. So I thought I'd just mention it here. It's also in the newspaper, but if folks are
Wow.
interested.
So, planning and zoning has already been,
No,
Nope,
no.
but we are now.
it'll be their September meeting, so
We know about it.
giving you a preview.
I've never heard about it.
Heads up.
Until right now.
I heard rumblings, but I didn't think it was real.
I've heard rumblings for years, and no one's ever made an application, and finally somebody has. So now we have the question asked, and we will get an answer.
That's why I didn't think it was real.
I just know process with that, if there's a variance, you guys saw it first and then it ended up that way. didn't you
Yep.
guys?
That's what
Goes to
we'll,
the
that's what
planning
we'll
zoning first.
Anything else?
Exciting.
We do need to talk about dates to look at the budget before your next meeting. So if you're thinking of leaving, let's do that now. Jay. I don't know if you're thinking of leaving or not. That's why I would put this at the end, so that you could skip out.
Oh, I see what you're saying. For the
right
last
now,
discussion of
Yeah.
of the meeting. Okay, I see what you're saying. I have noticed my child riding his bike back
I
and
see.
forth outside of the meeting, so I think he knows that at the end is imminent.
The circle.
Round and round.
So we find some dates? You're talking about like a work session kind of thing?
A work session.
A couple hours that we can sit down and we can.
What has
In
worked
September.
in the past is a couple hours the afternoon of the council meeting, just because that day is already kind of blocked off, but that makes for a long day. We need a few hours of your time, though, sometime before the next meeting.
And our next one's the 14th and then the 28th.
Well, we need to do it before the 14th, because at the meeting on the 14th, you're going to approve a preliminary levy.
Oh, so we gotta look at it before that.
Yeah.
That's really only next week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really,
Or
it's only
the
next
week of the 14th.
Or
Yeah.
we do the 14th.
I thought you said that we have to have it be done before the Wednesday.
You have to be done before 6:30 on the Wednesday.
Right, so that really only leaves next week.
I can, for a couple hours, I can be available during the workday, as long as I have enough knowledge of time that I can set it up.
Okay.
If that works for everybody else.
I am completely unavailable next week.
Completely?
Mm.
So that means that it's gotta be the week of the 14th then.
All right.
Unless you want to do something on a weekend.
Nope.
I meant the work week.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
I can do the 14th early, if that's what we want to do.
I mean, the 13th is the EDA meeting that afternoon, evening,
Okay.
so we'd have to be earlier than them. The 14th, there's nothing scheduled until the council meeting, so we could meet that afternoon if that works for people.
Would work for me.
It's fine. Like 12:30, did you say 2 hours?
Well, we'll send some times out and pick them, but we'll just focus on that day,
Is that okay, Anton?
On the 14th,
on the 14th.
4:30? Sure.
Could we do even earlier?
Sure.
4 would be my earliest.
Okay.
Yeah, 4 would be, I mean, I can be flexible, but after 4 is better.
After 4 on the 14th, we'll get it scheduled. Thank you.
Cool. So, last thing on the agenda. I turn that over to you, Craig.
Okay.
On that note, I'm gonna go try and track my child down.
Yeah.
He's out there somewhere.
You've got
See you back
wheels.
around.
I've got wheels, he's got wheels. We can
Ah.
figure it out.
It's getting dark.
I know, that's probably, the library closes at 8, so he usually hangs out at the library on Wednesdays until this.
Are they open?
Well,
Late night?
yeah, but if all of his friends went home, then he doesn't want to be there.
They were just a couple days closed. I think they're open today.
Thank you all for a good meeting.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jay.
See you, Jay.
later.
Thanks, Jay.
We'll go and watch the meeting on.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, you
I
will.
bet you will.
The big bucket of cookies.
I think Dairy Queen is probably in the future. All right.
All right.
Oh,
Okay, so moving on to the last item on this evening's agenda is the city's response to North House proposal discussion. So I will open up the meeting for any discussion that any city council members might want to lead off with concerning, or in response to the meeting, I guess we had 2 weeks ago?
no, it was
3
end
weeks
of
ago?
July.
It's
5 weeks
So
ago.
we're
3 weeks
already
ago.
at the end of August.
End of August, end of July, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
I would just kind of go back and
well, the city did have a response. I don't have that. You have that?
well, it was very brief, and I
Yeah.
think our promise was, we didn't really explain ourselves, we just gave an answer.
Right.
And that for North House and for the rest of the community, everyone needs to understand what led us to that decision.
Mhm.
I don't view tonight as a planning or, thinking through next steps or solutions or anything like that. I mean, you guys may feel differently. But I do feel that we need to do that, and with Fisherman's Picnic and all the other activities, it was just more than I felt I had on my plate to do. I don't know about the rest of you, so I was thankful to have the time. And we tried to work out some working sessions to do this as a group, so we could just kind of give one big, here it is. That really didn't work with everyone's time schedule, so it's my understanding we'll just go around the room and whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who wants to go first?
You want to go around this way?
You want me to start in the middle?
Sure.
Sure, go ahead.
All right, I can give my, my reasoning for how I came to the consensus that, or at least my opinion on, so looking back at the option of the sale or discussing other options. To me, it really came down with, the understanding that with what North House, through their community conversations that they'd had with, community members, to how folks wanted to see the property be used, how they wanted to see the preservation of the Scott Fish House, and really, I thought most of what they put forward in that idea of purchasing, there was many of those ideas came from public comment, except for maybe the process of like they should buy the land, or at least ask to buy the land. I think that preservation, adaptation, and ability to use the Scott Fish House as a location to share the history of the harbor and the community, I think was important and something they gained from the community's input. I think parking and what their conversation was in, expanding parking potentially onto the north side of the highway on the property they own there. To me, the desire still to add classrooms, if you're gonna fix up the fish house, you're gonna build parking, you're gonna build classrooms, that's a lot of money. And so if the outlay that they would have to make would also include whatever that price was gonna be for land, should we have decided to sell it, it would have really, I think, made those other three things, those other three action items from their plan much less attainable. I think it would have put them in an awkward situation of getting a lot of good input, having a plan to do the input, but now not really having the ability to do that because they just bought land. So to me, I feel like finding a way and a path forward with North House through a revision of the lease would allow them to do the things that the community says they want to see done. And it would allow the city to be in a stronger position financially, partially with lease agreement, but also just us still maintaining control allows us that kind of extra kind of bit of control on what happens on the city property. So that's where, I mean, it was 15 seconds into that meeting, and I mean, I knew that's where I was at coming into it. So
Right on.
so it wasn't like we're not selling you this because we hate you. I think that I think the best possibility for like a continued success of North House and the city of Grand Marais working together is really through the plan that they laid out. The exception being like we work through some change in the language to the lease. I will say I've heard a lot of comments from folks about that their rate is too low. I do know that my understanding is, I guess, is that the way that that initial lease was written was as a form of offset to what property taxes would have been paid. Of course, property taxes haven't been paid on that property when it was federal, and they haven't been paid while they're city. So if you look at what North House pays in property taxes as a nonprofit, just even looking at that small portion in lease payments to the city, it's actually greater than any other nonprofit in the city of Grand Marais. And I think there's some questions on valuation of the property, and so where those numbers could be low. But if you look at city share of property taxes, commercial properties on the waterfront around the city of Grand Marais, they're within 15%, I think. Well, I know in looking up stuff. So I don't think it's that far off. I think when I've brought that point up to people, some of the pushback I've got from that is like, well, yeah, but they charge, whether it's the fishermen or the, North Shore Title, they charge this much for rent, they charge this much for rent. Like they are making a lot of money on rent, yet they have this whole piece of property that they're not really paying that much for rent on. Which of course, then, in those entities, those are all for-profit companies, so they are then paying taxes on, like, there's a reason that they're charging that much for rent, because it's for a business that they have to pay property taxes then on when those portions of their property are being used as money-making ventures.
Right.
So, I mean, there's a whole bunch of different ways to look at it, but I'll shut up about it. But I mean, I think, I don't know, and I don't think we're going to get into that tonight as far as like, what is that magical number that we think is fair? But I do think that like for both of our success, both this, I think that North House has proven itself to be an asset to the community on many, many levels. And I think that, a lot of that has to do with the willingness of the city council in 2000, well, even earlier than that, to kind of give them a shot. And I think that like, I'd like to show that we still support their mission, and we want to work together to try and find something that's beneficial, not just to North House, but also to the city of Grand Marais and the residents in the city that, they're paying taxes. So. That's I had it much clearer in my head, I think, like 5 weeks ago. That was much more drawn out, so I apologize.
Yeah. No.
You're quite concise.
That's great. Can I just interject just briefly? So is the intention of this portion of this meeting that we're going to come up with some statement for all that we're saying? Or we're
That's not
just,
the way I understand this. All I
Okay,
understand
we're just
is
pitching
this
in.
is like
Okay.
airing of grievances. No, it's like it's our opportunity to kind of, because
All
we
right.
couldn't, there was not a consensus
okay,
as far as what the language should have been.
okay.
We
Yeah.
didn't have a chance to meet. We never had a chance to sit down with the work.
So now we're just airing our grievances, and then
Such a nice tone
You're sharing your thoughts.
we're
which
sharing
is-
our thoughts.
Which is greatly appreciated.
that we
Yes.
do it independently because we
Okay,
didn't have an
and this will just be
opportunity.
out there in the record, and,
Yes.
okay, got it. Very good. Did you want to go, Craig? You look excited.
No, I'm fine. I mean, I think Anton kind of summed up a lot of same things that I've heard and things that I've thought about also. Yes, I mean, I don't know what we need to develop. I think coming out of this meeting is maybe some type of a plan to review some things in the lease and maybe open up a dialogue to create some policy between us and the North House moving forward with a new revision of the lease. I mean, I think that's, we want to do that effectively and in fairness for the city and in fairness for the North House and the community, because we're all in this together. And I don't want it to be, I had a talk with someone earlier today about this being kind of like high pressure, and I'm just like, why is this such high pressure? It shouldn't be that, because I mean, I wake up at 3 a.m. thinking about stuff like this, and it's like, why am I doing this, I mean, not why I'm sitting here, but it's just, why is this bothering me? Because it shouldn't have to be. I think it's just that this is a very simple thing that we need to have a dialogue and a discussion. I think it would help us to know more about the North House's plans in the future, so that we can understand their thinking on, why they're purchasing other properties and what their intent of those properties are, and how that relates to the property that they lease from the city today. And maybe that would help us understand some of the things that are going on within the North House. It helped me anyway. So yeah, I mean, I just think I'd like to jumpstart this by basically saying, the next thing we should do is meet with the North House, however we can do that, about some dialogue over the lease. I think the big thing is the money that the lease currently pays the city. I think that's the biggest thing that I've heard throughout all of this, is it needs to be readjusted and it needs to be fair. Other than, the concept that they had when they were going to get the conditional use permit to build a building down there on the water, and of course that was met with some resistance from the community, simply because everybody wants to see the water. And I think that's something that we need to be part of in that decision making too, as it pertains to the land that we own. We can only control that. We can't control other land that people own if they build according to building code and building ways that we allow. But I guess, yeah, that's, for me, I'd like to move ahead with some meetings with representatives of the North House, whoever we have to meet with, to kind of start a plan of how we accomplish those things, and how maybe we produce an updated lease that meets today's times, That's kind of how I'm thinking. Michael, I'm shooting it over to you.
Thanks,
I
Greg.
watched that go like this.
I
He's
saw you
getting
reaching for your
ready.
microphone, so you were in on it.
Yes, thank you, Craig. So, I guess for me, what was most, I came into the meeting differently. I came in, I'm willing to have more negotiations and talk about whatever, because I thought, well, I don't know everything. Maybe there's something that could convince me that this is a good plan to sell this property. But then in listening to everybody here and other people, I was pretty convinced of the importance of maintaining possession of that land by the city. That alone, to me, felt really compelling, that, if we hold on to that, we have ability to control what happens there to some degree, or to a great degree. And we want that. We want that for the future. We don't know what the future holds, and we would really want to have that for our kids and grandkids and that kind of thing, to, because we don't know what's coming around the pike, and to hold on to that as a group, as a community investment, something that belongs to all of us, I think is really important. And was compelling, like that piece was compelling to me. And also I feel like with our lease agreement, we've got a good relationship going. If we want to make changes, if they want to make changes, we got to do it together, right? We know we have to negotiate it anyway, so nothing's going to happen unless we negotiate. And I feel like we can get there. I feel like we've got good actors on both sides, and I feel like we can get to a place where we can get to a better lease agreement that works for everybody. I think it'll be a negotiation, it'll take some time and whatever, but, so that's, at least as far as the sale goes, I feel like I get, like, okay, we want to hold on to that piece, and we want to negotiate something that works for everybody. That was kind of where I came down. Over to you, Tracy.
So sticking with the, why did we do this, or what was my thoughts about this? I tried to pop it up a little bit. So I viewed the city priorities is that, first of all, with that piece of property, we always have to be thinking about what its optimal use is, and that we're always going to be balancing a variety of communities' priorities from a lot of voices. And when I think of community, which is the word that gets thrown around all the time by everybody, I just want to clarify, I mean every resident in this county. I don't mean like just voting citizens of the city of Grand Marais.
Mm-hmm.
And I also hear, to me, a priority that we really need to reduce the traffic and parking congestion over there. I think we've already seen, a change of businesses over there rather recently, and some of them were surprises that I wouldn't have expected. But there's still the chance that, there will be more businesses than we used to have over there. But more than anything, I think one of the things our highway project did not accomplish was much to help that area with traffic congestion, really at all. To me, might even be worse. And then the second piece, and these weren't in any particular order, is that the city has a priority to the lake and to the harbor for everyone. And residents, visitors, our businesses, it needs to stay visible, and it needs to be accessible for everyone. And some of it is already private, but I don't want to be the one to contribute to that, just changing it more. So those are what I felt were the big priorities. Some of the things that I heard from different people originally, and I'm not saying that you guys didn't address some of these, but just listing, the things that came through, was a disregard for our local heritage, which was the Scott Fish House. And this is being repetitive, I know, but the lack of property taxes paid. And to me, when I think that through, I realize that property taxes, for a couple reasons, become sensitive. First of all, because they are the essential services that everyone needs, including an organization like yours, which actually has brick and mortar and space. There's many nonprofits that don't have that. Our community is full of nonprofits, but not all of them have real estate and land holdings quite to the extent. And of course, we all recognize that North House is just doing what any nonprofit would do. I mean, that you're not doing anything unusual. That's just how it works for you, right? Following your deal. But the perception is difficult for people. And kind of as Anton was just saying, there's an operational cost for other local businesses that they have to bake that cost into their operation. And you may be a nonprofit, but basically you're an operation. When you look at all the nonprofits in our community, most of them are at a much smaller scale. And they truly are just a bunch of people working together here. And I mean, that's how a lot of things get done in this town. And then when you get to an operation like North House, it's pretty big, it's pretty sophisticated. And so it starts to feel like a business to most people. And I know some parts of it, maybe just looking at what city taxes might be, but for most people, they're looking at the whole tax package. And of course, classifications affect what your taxes might be too. It's kind of hard to do a comparison with other businesses or other properties because you have to look at that part of it too. So it's not an easy answer, but I think it's still one that we have to think through. And it's obvious, I think most of us recognize that was a huge comment. The other piece is the concern that unlike many of our businesses and certainly other nonprofits, you've had, I don't know if you want to say the luxury or maybe your own hard work, but you've had the ability to make multiple real estate purchases in the last few years, most of which many businesses here would not have had the luxury or ability to do. And as best as I can figure right now, 3 out of 4 of them aren't suiting your purposes. And that's a perception of, or a question among people that I hear too. It shows you obviously have the ability to raise the capital that many people may not have. I mean, they might have to sit on their purchases or make them function. And then it also becomes a perception of accumulating and becoming, land and becoming a landlord, which, as you know, you have rental properties. And part of my comments this here is just to ask that you turn around and put yourself in someone else's shoes and see how they're looking at it. Not that it's just a perception, and not just, but there's also a concern from our residents of overdevelopment on the harbor, that even what you have now is too crowded, and continuing to build out might be best done on a better location for all the things you've told us are a priority in all of your needs. And then there's a question from our residents and our people, is the city using this property for its best use? There's been other ideas and suggestions about what we could be doing with this property. You started as an incubator, have you outgrown it? And then how much of a partnership are you within the larger community? That's been a concern as well. And finally, part of your larger plan, as we have heard when you've been gracious and, to tell us some of your larger plans, which you have, there's people are like, well, you want to put your interns and your staff and your operations on lakefront property, and a lot of business owners can't even find housing for their staff, but you feel it's essential that they have to be down on the lake. That doesn't always go over very well either. And one of the other, changing gears just a little bit, and I think Craig was mentioning this as well, and I know you said in your letter you're ready to get to work and get your planning going. I think it's a suggestion, but I think more transparency. You were very good about telling all of us what some of your plans were and thoughts, and that, maybe they've changed now. But I think the larger community would probably want to hear that. Not just, I need a classroom or 1 or 2 classrooms, but if you still intend to replace that yellow house, if you still intend to replace Fisherman's Daughter for housing, intern housing, if you still intend to move your back office operations across the street and down into the lake, you talked about a skyway between your new buildings and potentially a lack of parking for fishermen. Maybe when you present your proposals, which I know you don't have to, but it might be nice to have the big picture for everyone. Because to talk about them in isolation, like I just need a new classroom, like I say, if you changed your deal, then maybe that doesn't apply, but that might be a helpful way to move forward. And the no to a sale was, as Michael just said, taking the long view. We heard time and time again from a variety of people, we'll never get it back. And I don't think that's right. It's one of those, like the MasterCard ad, it's priceless, and we need to retain that. For all sorts of reasons. Organizations come and go, and sometime in the future you may not be what you are right now. which is true of lots of things that's happened. We watched it with other nonprofits in this community, and it happens with businesses. It's not unusual. And making sure that land stays there, I think would be super important to everyone. The other piece, which I didn't say very well the last time, I'm going to try this one more time, is sometimes when you get a piece of property and you alter it and you change it, maybe you put a building on it or whatever, and then all of a sudden you want to change things in the way it goes, people will look and say, well, we don't want to waste a building that you put here. We don't want to, you know, it's money well spent. Why would we change that? So then people's perceptions change along with it. And so that's why I think for us to take that property and sell it and then somehow say we would ever get it back or whatever, or want to purchase it knowing it was built and redone for a certain purpose would be more difficult. It changes how it looks. And for me, the one that sat from day one is basically if your mission statement is to teach traditional craft, and I might not be saying completely correctly, but, and we've heard this loud and clear, and I take classes and I fill out your surveys and I know what they say too. But if that your value, if your value proposition means that there's only success if you're located on the harbor in Lake Superior, then I don't feel strongly that you have a value proposition that's working. If people value the classes and what you have to offer and the learnings that they can have and the traditions that you're growing and spreading and just, you know, the knowledge, it shouldn't require Lake Superior to accomplish it. And I heard that a lot. And that is my upper question. And then it hit me the other day, you know, our local art colony was started, and they, you know, I don't know what they do now, but traditionally many of those students, they were down in the lake painting their pictures, but they didn't need to be located there to accomplish that mission. So that was a thing that just sort of popped into my head the other night. And back into the incubator thing, you know, I've heard a lot of conversation about, oh, when we started and this is what it was. So then I wonder, well, you know, have you outgrown it? Do you need a bigger space? I know you have a lot of cool things you want to do. I know you'd like to make sure you had better housing for your instructions. I know you'd like to have room for your interns. I know you'd like to have more building space. Is this, you know, do you have needs bigger than you really can fit in that and meet what our community would like to see around our harbor? I mean, that's for you guys to decide, obviously, but and the other piece that was very difficult for me is when we've all asked you, how big is big? When do you know you've reached your optimal space? Because you could build one building, you could build two, but maybe it's still more space you need. I don't know. I mean, and the only answer that has come back, which is great for donors and it's a nice story and I enjoy pizza bakes, but I don't consider, you know, if we outgrow the pizza bake Saturday night as a really sound business way to make that kind of decision about what is the best size of North House Folk School. And then it leaves me a little uncertain about how do you make what I consider really serious decisions. And most businesses would not take their back office operations and move them to prime and very premium expensive real estate. Those are costs you keep at a minimum. And that would be staff that has to do back office things or housing for interns. Obviously you can do as you like, but, and I don't mean that in a flippant way, I mean it's your decision. But looking at that, then it makes me more uncertain. So then what would need to be redone? Like everyone else has said, the rent needs to be rethought. I think we also have to think through what we would consider permissible uses on this leased land in the future. And any other items recommended by our city attorney. He did make a comment that there may be other, just in general, about that lease that we might want to re-look at.
Mhm.
That's right.
I think that's me going on quite a while. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing, though. It all comes back to that lease agreement, and that's where we can make some trades and figure out a nice way forward.
You know, a good first step might be to have North House come and present their master plan to you in a public setting and try to get at some of the questions that you're asking. How big are you planning on getting? How dense is it going to be built out? Is there adequate parking? How does it all lay out? And maybe gaining that understanding will help, before you need to get into the next pieces of the conversation. That might be a good place to start.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you want to talk about the process of a negotiation, we've typically done it with a small group because the conversations can be difficult, complex, and hard to do in the public. But I don't know if that's the right choice this time. I think because you all have your own slightly different view on this, that this is the right setting for the conversation, at least for a little while, until maybe you've distilled down to some kind of core issues that you'd want to see addressed. So, public meetings. And I'm really appreciative of all of your willingness to share your thoughts about it. I think it's a gift to the community that you did, so thanks.
I think that's a really good idea because there was so much concern around our whole community. So I think that is a really good idea. It gives them that opportunity in a central space and see it, if they can't be, they can tune in later.
For the reruns.
Yeah.
As long as
Without
the internet
commercial.
works.
Right. It's true. Starlink. Sorry.
Anybody else have any suggestions?
No, I think
Moving forward.
I think that's great if North House is willing to come and have that conversation and share with us what they see as their master plan. That'll help us
Mm-hmm.
see how the city piece of that puzzle fits into that. So, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that's great. I
And
think
then,
these are the
then-
things that will make things better in the long run. I think these kinds of conversations will come out with a better ending for everybody.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for your comments. Quite a bit to think about. But I think that we can move forward with the conversation, and I think that's what we would like to do, all of us together. Okay.
We're there.
So I guess that's everything. I have nothing more to say about anything, you guys. You okay? All right.
All right.
All right, so that wraps up the meeting. I need a motion to adjourn.
I would so move.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
All in favor, aye. Motion made. Adjournment is done.
Good job, Craig.
It
12 minutes
It's
early.
8:13.
12 minutes early.
Yay, dinner in my
We did
future.
skip a